Okay, I'm fairly new to, I mean, I'm not new to Stranger Things, um, but I'm fairly new to the community that believes that Mike and Will actually will get together in the show. Um, I was thoroughly convinced at the end of season 4 that it was going to be another sad, unrequited love queer story where the queer character comes to like accept themselves and just be happy being alone because that's like true strength. And I was so, that narrative is so persistent that I was like so convinced. I was like, oh, yeah, there it is. And I shared a few thoughts on the first 2 episodes of season 5. And I think in those thoughts, I mentioned like, yeah, season 3 and season 4 were really disappointing. They just kind of weren't hitting for me. And then I saw someone talking about like Byler Endgame, and I was like, Nancy and Jonathan. And then I was like, oh shit, no, Mike and Will. Um, and after watching the rest of season 5, I was like, oh shit, Mike and Will. Um, and then I was like, but some of the dialogue still isn't hitting for me, specifically in the first episode. Maybe the first 2 episodes, I think. No, it was mostly the first episode. Anyway, and some of the dynamics on screen were still not hitting super well. Um, and like, I don't think it's perfect, but I have drastically changed my opinion because I was like, but season 1 was fantastic. God, I want to watch season 1 again. So I went back and watched season 1 again, and like, oh my God. And I feel like there's one thing, since then I've watched a few, probably a dozen or more Byler video essays, because watching it again, I'm on season 2 now, but I've watched the first 4 episodes of season 5 a couple of times, I'll be honest. Um, and remembering, obviously I remember moments like the rain fight and Will's like painting confession in season 4, and those kind of iconic moments. But there was a lot that I didn't remember. But after season 5, I was like, oh shit, this might be happening. Either that or there was like a weirdly homoerotic scene that didn't need to be there for any other reason. Um, and yes, I'm going to say homoerotic even though the characters are supposed to be, what, 16, 17. It's that's just the term I'm using. Um, Obviously, I'm not like whatever. But I went back and I was watching season 1, and season 1 I was like, oh wow, this really is so much about Will's queerness, and seeing how Hawkins is portrayed as this like cage and the concept of freaks and weirdos, and then seeing in the essays things like going crazy together, and I've been like, oh yeah, I'm fully convinced. But also, the one thing that I haven't really seen anyone mention, aside from like the significance of the rain fight and like rain as an important like romantic trope, is just the importance of water to the relationship. So that's what I'm talking about here. Obviously, you know that if you read the title, but that's kind of how it started. Because the thing that made me go, I mean, obviously in season 5, I was like, water, duh, emotions, flooding. And I will get to that. I've got some notes because I didn't want to, right? It's going to be a little ad-libbed, a little make it up as we go. I haven't really done any like video essays, so we're just gonna see how this goes. That's your disclaimer, that's your warning. But season 1, it really struck me watching it again how much they hammer home that Will is queer. Disclaimer, I'm going to use the term queer because queer is the term that I use to mean non-cis het. It is my term of preference because it's easier in language, and I use it to differentiate between like not possessing, but being of a gender identity and sexuality that are the preferred ones by dominant culture, and then being other. And I think it works with the show because of the way the show identifies them as freaks. They are identified, all the characters are identified as freaks from the get-go. And that's also another thing. We know why Lucas is considered a freak, obviously because of his race and racism. We know why Dustin is considered a freak because he has a physical difference with his something cranial dysplasia, and I can't remember the name right now, but he has a physical difference. Will is considered a freak because people have identified, maybe even before he has, that he is queer. Mike, we don't get an explanation for. We just know that he's one of the freaks because he's a nerd and he likes D&D. Like, that's not enough for me. I'm sorry. He's got to have something else. But that's a whole other thing about how, like, the whole story is a queer story. So this is going to focus on those, but I am using the term queer also just as a queer person, as someone who is, you know, like queer literature, queer theory. That is stuff that I'm moderately familiar with, and queer is the term that's kind of most generally used. I understand that it was not always the accepted term. I can understand if it's not your preferred term, but that's what I mean by that, and so that's the term that I'm going to be using. I'm also probably going to use freak throughout this to refer to them, but that might not actually play into this at all. That's more about, thoughts are marinating on the whole, why the entire story is a queer story, and that has a lot to, anyway, different video essay, or maybe written essay, who knows. Different topic for another day. So back to season 1. Will's disappearance is explicitly blamed on or associated with his queerness. We're told that he was probably killed by some other queer. We're told that he's in fairyland now with all the other fairies being all happy and gay. We're told that Lonnie used to call him, or used to say he was queer and call him a slur. And it's like, it's made very apparent to us that Will is queer and that people associate, or it is associated by the Duffers in the script with his disappearance. However you read Hopper's, well, is he? Like, whether he thinks maybe this is a hate crime, or whether he thinks, like, whether he's just asking, like, oh, is he queer? Would he be, like, up to no good? Whatever the rationale is there, his disappearance and his queerness are consistently associated. And then his disappearance is associated with the quarry. And again, it's blamed on him. The blame for his disappearance, his supposed death, is constantly put on Will. And the quarry is the tool of how they do this. So another thing that we need to kind of be on the same page about going through this is that water represents emotion. In, like, just kind of consistently, I guess it's not across every text ever written, but pretty consistently across cultures and eras and spiritualities, and, like, water represents emotion and water represents the unconscious. Whether it's the collective unconscious or the personal unconscious, water represents what is buried beneath. Water represents what is hidden, what is unexplored, the emotional depths, right? That's kind of the main thing. Water is the emotional depths that we are often afraid to explore. And that, I think, is what makes it so important to Stranger Things and to Mike and Will's relationship. And that's the fear aspect is going to come in as well. It is not a coincidence that Mike's D&D character is called Mike the Brave. We're going to get to that, especially with how much bravery. Sorry, we're going to get to that. Season 1, the quarry. Will is supposed to have drowned in the quarry. It's implied to be his fault, you know, that he got too close and the ground collapsed beneath him and he fell off the edge. Like, he ran to the quarry and just fell in. They're like, well, they don't explicitly say it's his fault, but it's like, nobody's to blame, this just happens, which is so often how the deaths and just any tragedies that occur among marginalized people are kind of attributed. Like, oh, what a shame, nobody's to blame, that's just how it works, that's just what happens. Just wanted to pop in and say, we actually get an explicit example of this is what happens when you break the rules, this is what happens when you are different. It's just phrased as see what happens, but we get it from Ted Wheeler, who is like, I mean, he's the one who also gives us, they're our government, we can trust them. And it's like the most performative heterosexual relationship in the whole thing. And when he tells Mike, like, see, Mike, see what happens? I can't remember exactly what the line is, but it's essentially that. It's, see, Mike, this is what happens. And that's just kind of implied, right? If you break the rules, if you go against the grain, if you are different and openly different in any way, this is just what happens to you. And queer people in media especially fall into this trap, the bury your gays trope, where the kind of assumption is that queer people will not live as long, which I think the Duffer Brothers are subverting, because queer people will end up alone and queer people will not live as long are the two like biggest queer, not tropes, but I don't know, outcomes, storylines, if you will. And I think they use the quarry to do that, because Hawkins is consistently portrayed as this really limiting place, this environment where people don't understand anyone who's different, and that is supposedly the environment of Hawkins, the emotions that are buried in Hawkins. I'm not explaining this part very well, but the emotional depths are supposedly what killed Will, and everyone's just kind of fine with that. When I say everyone is fine with that here, I mean the town as a whole, and that is highlighted by the performative grief at his funeral. His dad, who doesn't give a shit, who is there acting like the grieving husband, while Joyce is actually distraught, even though she still doesn't fully believe that he's dead, and Jennifer Hayes crying at his funeral, which Dustin, Mike, and Lucas explicitly say, like, haha, look at that, how crazy. Like, this is not a friend of his. This is a performance. And we even get that idea of like losing faith from the whoever's officiating. I don't know what you would call him. But that idea of we need to keep our faith in this time. We need to keep our faith. Faith in what? Faith in something that we cannot see. Faith in something spiritual, also often represented by water. And maybe this is also a topic for a different essay, but water is also symbolic of spirit, of source, of the divine. And I think it connects really well here in the idea of queer love and queer relationships transcending the mundane and the divinity that exists within relationships and lives where people are truly free to be themselves. I'm not saying every queer person in every queer relationship has no problems and is like totally divine at all times, but the ability of love to transcend the limitations of everyday human, like constructed social life, of the whatever you want to call it, this like 3D society that we live in and all of its rules and impositions, which Hawkins perfectly represents. Hawkins is the ultimate social cage, and water is tied to not only emotion and love, but also to the spiritual, to the unconscious, to something more than that, which we see when Elle taps in to the void, right? Water is also tied to the void, the endless creative potential. And Elle taps into that. And I think it's important that water is there's a tie between love and relationships, between emotion, between that void, that potential, and the world that people don't believe in, the world of things that people reject. And I think we see that very well at Will's funeral, but also just throughout like the rest of the series. Okay, when Will has supposedly drowned in this quarry, we see the reappearance of his, again, explicitly homophobic father, who does not care that Will is dead, does not care about, and we know, it's canon that he doesn't care about Will. He doesn't care at all when Will goes missing. Only when he finds out that he's dead, he comes back to try to profit from the thing that killed him, which just is so perfectly intact. Lonnie is not intact, perfectly in line. Lonnie is the toxic homophobic father, like the masculinity, his girlfriend, there's just so much insidious nonsense with Lonnie. But most importantly, we know that Lonnie is homophobic, and we know that the song Will listens to, or not listens to, the song Will sings in the Upside Down that kind of saves, it doesn't necessarily save him, it keeps him going, is a song that was played to him for the first time by Jonathan in an explicit moment of Will being rejected by their father and Jonathan empowering him to in turn reject the need for acceptance by their father. The idea that their father has never done anything that Will likes with him, that he tries to get him to do boy things, he tries to take him to baseball games. He's trying to make him a straight boy and make him do all the normal boy things. And this song is introduced in that moment to help him reject that, right? It's explicitly, Jonathan says, like, you don't even like baseball. He doesn't even do any things you like. But you like this song, right? You like The Clash. And, like, for real. And Will says, yeah, for real. Like, we know that this song represents him being authentic to himself and rejecting the need for approval from his homophobic father. Also, just the song, Should I Stay or Should I Go, in this context, does, to me, feel like an 80s version of the To Be or Not to Be soliloquy. That idea of, should I stay or should I go? If I stay, there will be trouble. Or if I go, there will be trouble. But if I stay, it will be double. That idea of how difficult it is, speaking from experience, how difficult it is to stay in the right side up in the world when when there is this sort of insidious upside down wrongness that you are sort of immersed in, which I think is part of what the upside down represents. Not wrongness as in queerness, wrongness as in a feeling of wrongness, a feeling of being a mistake, which of course Will divulges to us in season 4. And he says, like, you've got to let me know, right? Well, he doesn't say it, but the song says, you've got to let me know, come on and let me know. Like, he's begging someone to tell him to stay. And Jonathan tells him to stay. His mom tells him, Jonathan tells him through the song, right? He sings the song that Jonathan showed him when Jonathan was showing him how worthy he was, how much he loved Will, and kind of being that, like, role model that his father wasn't, that caring, almost paternal figure. And his mom tells him to stay when she is talking to him through the walls. She even, I think, says, stay right there. Like, she tells him, stay, don't go. And I think that is very important. Mike tries to talk to him, but he can't hear Mike. And that, I think, is part of the symbolism of Mike. I'm not totally sure what I feel about that, but I think it's important that he can't hear when Mike calls out to him through the radio. He can't hear it. And then it becomes especially significant with Mike, right? We can already see, like, a bit of sort of queer coding there, the assumption that, like, oh, Will drowned. Like, it's a tragic death, again, often associated with queerness, that idea of your emotions being the thing to kill you. In media and literature, not necessarily in life, obviously. But the thing that really is the kicker here, Mike very nearly jumps into and therefore drowns in. Remember, Hopper has said that it will break every bone in your body from that height. And if Mike jumped into the quarry and was unconscious, bones broken, like, there is very little chance that he would be able to swim to the shore, wherever it is from there, and survive. It's a death sentence for Mike to jump off that cliff. But he almost does it. He very nearly drowns in the same body of water that killed Will. And he does it at the urging of Will's explicitly homophobic bully. It is literally homophobia that drives him. And remember, this, like, it's direct correlation. Troy is being homophobic. Mike stands up to him. He tries to hit Mike. Elle fights back. And that is what causes him to then try to drive Mike off the cliff. Like, it's a direct line of retaliation and bitterness and fear, essentially, that almost leads Mike to not take his own life, but to allow himself to die in the same body of water that supposedly killed Will. The thing that stopped him is Elle. Elle is the thing that stops him from drowning. Not only does Elle stop him from drowning, she actually stops him from entering the water at all. stopping him from exploring the emotions that are lurking there, and stopping him from unearthing, and again, right, water is the unexplored depths, stopping him from going beneath the surface and seeing what lurks there, what is waiting for him to discover in the wake of Will's supposed death. Elle is the tool that prevents that. Additionally, he is the one who names her Elle. Elle is, like, this might be a stretch for some people, but to me, sure, Elle could be a short form for 11. 11 is a weird name to pick. To me, it makes the most sense that Elle is, we're meant to think Elle as in the French word for she. It's not an uncommonly known word. I mean, there's Elle magazine. Like, this girl is literally, she's compared continuously to Will. We're told that she looks like Will, that she could be Will if Will had a buzz cut. She's continuously compared to and paralleled with Will, but Mike gives her the name Elle. And personally, I can't see that not as, like, I mean, we even have, like, Elle Woods. Like, Elle is a girl's name. And it just means girl. It just means she. And, I mean, excellent use in Legally Blonde. We love that. But that's kind of her purpose. She is not her purpose. She's obviously a character in her own right. But Mike sees her as Elle. He sees her as the girl who can stop him from diving into these absolutely terrifying emotions, because diving into that quarry is terrifying. And he knows that he might not necessarily survive it, but that it would hurt and that it is dangerous. He knows that, and she is the one who is able to stop that from happening and to keep him safe for a little while longer. But Elle is the one who stops him from drowning in that body of water. Elle saves him from that same fate that it is assumed that Will has fallen prey to. And what the Upside Down represents as a whole, again, a topic for another day. I've got thoughts on that too. I really think season 1 was just impeccably done. And now I think the other seasons have been as well, because I'm kind of going to skip over season 2 because I'm only rewatching season 2 now, and the main thing that stands out, like, I don't remember a lot of water symbolism in season 2. The main thing that stands out in season 2 is the crazy together scene, which, again, I haven't really seen, like, the infamous Byler slides. It talks about the subtext of crazy, but especially in the US at the time, like, homophobic legislation, like, I actually don't know exactly what this legislation was in 1983, but historically, queerness has either been criminalized or medicalized, and this is still a problem. So again, we have that parallel of, like, this thing about him is wrong, and this thing about him, again, the idea of madness, of craziness, often is associated with the tragic outcomes that have, that sounds so trite. Madness is often an excuse, or was often used as an excuse, just like criminality, for the horrific treatment of queer people and the horrible suffering that we have endured historically. Like, I haven't personally, but I mean, as a collective, queer people have been persecuted and have been called crazy, just like people who think that there might be a queer relationship in this show are called crazy. And again, that's probably more of a topic for, like, why Stranger Things is a queer story. But that's kind of the only thing I remember from season 2. I don't really remember any other water symbolism, so we're kind of skipping over season 2. Season 3, obviously, we have the rain fight. But we have something else as well. So the rain fight, obviously we know, we've been told that season 3, is it the Mind Flayer? I think it is. The big shadow monster, creepy spider guy, who I think is the Mind Flayer, again, I'm still only rewatching season 2, is representative of puberty. So we know that this is when these things are going to start to come up. This is when the things that before were just, like, vague threats and bullying that didn't really have a basis in reality, because obviously Will had not done anything explicitly queer. Like, before, there's that idea that before puberty, queerness is accepted because it's just affection for people, and there isn't that like harsh gender divide, that harsh idea of sexuality and what you should be, which Mike displays so thoroughly throughout the whole season. Like, again, looking back at it, it's like, oh yeah, internalized homophobia, that makes the most sense, because otherwise why is Mike suddenly an absolute prick? um, but the rain fight is important not only because it's framed as a romantic scene, like we all know the trope of, and again, that just is like, we all know that rain equals heavy emotions. It's that idea of like a thunderstorm where the tension and the pressure builds and builds until it breaks, and then it all comes flooding out. This is like a common device, pathetic fallacy. A rainstorm is heavy emotion. It can also obviously be representative of like heartbreak and sadness, like the idea of like the world is crying. But more importantly, it's just deep and profound emotional release, which I think it's really important that the fight happens in the garage where they're both staying dry. They don't let themselves go into the rain in that moment. And then once Mike is homophobic and tells Will that he's not playing D&D with him because Will's gay and it's not his fault, like, that whole bit, obviously Will is heartbroken. That is when Will lets himself immerse in those emotions. That is when he goes out into the rain and he goes, oh, wow, this is something. Like, there's a recognition on Will's face in that moment that what Mike has said is true, and that Will is deeply hurt by it because Will is aware of it. Okay, so the rain fight, Mike basically accuses Will of being gay and throws it in his face and says, it's pretty, not explicitly, but directly, I'm not hanging out with you because I have a girlfriend, because that's what's normal. And you should have expected that because you don't like girls, eventually you would be left behind. Like, that's the subtext there. I am normal and got a girlfriend, and therefore I am leaving you behind in childhood. Our relationship is no longer as important because what's normal is for me now to care more about a hetero relationship than to care about you. And it's not my fault that you are not like that. And again, it's an accusation, right? For something to be someone's fault, to have a fault implies that there is something wrong. Mike is saying, you know, I'm not wrong, and just you being wrong has nothing to do with me. Like, it's a horrible line, and also not something you would ever, like, the Mike of season 1 and 2, knowing that Will was queer, which he clearly does know because he says, it's not my fault you don't like girls, and immediately realizes what he said. Mike of season 1 and 2 would not say it like that. He would be comforting. He would say, like, he would talk to Will and say, look, I get that you're not interested in girls, but I really care about Elle, and our dynamics are changing, and I still care about you, but I care about her too. Mike of season 1 and 2 would not say, it's not my fault you're a queer, and leave it at that. And, like, to be fair, Mike doesn't leave it at that. But that is just so inconsistent with the character. But it's not inconsistent with the storyline of, like, puberty messes you up. The emergence of these feelings, the breaking of the clouds to cause this thunderstorm, like, all of these emotions coming up, messes with you. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. It is not, like, that is the whole point of the monster of this season, is things changing, leaving childhood behind, things getting more difficult, relationships changing. And I think the rain here is a perfect example of, like, when they're still in Mike's house, when they're still in the basement or the garage, they're safe from that rain. And when they leave that basement, that's when they have to face the emotion. I also think it's important that in that fight, they're not standing in the rain, but they're right next to it. Like they can't ignore it, but they're not in it. It's there, it's present, and it's making its presence known. Like the emotions are coming to the surface, but they're not openly addressing them. They're not actually stepping into them and letting themselves feel them, which is why it is such a vicious fight. Like, they can't ignore the rain there, and they're getting louder and shouting, and it's like the presence of the rain amps up the tension because things are coming to the surface, but they are avoiding looking at those things. So Will is devastated, and he finally lets himself like feel that heartbreak, which we see when he destroys Castle Byers. He is destroying childhood. He's destroying his like self-sovereignty. He's destroying the safety of the relationships that he's felt. And he is doing that in this torrent of emotion. Mike, because he cares so much about Will, has to immerse in that emotion to follow him. Now, he doesn't, like, I'm pretty sure Will goes out with without like putting a jacket on or putting his hood up or anything. I think Mike puts his hood on to follow him and like tries to keep a little bit dry, but he has to go out into that storm. And I think that is part of what leads us to season 4. Because season 4 is the driest season. Oh, before we get to season 4, season 3, the other body of water, not body of water, the other instance of water that we get is the pool. And again, the pool links. Is Lover's Lake in season 2? No, Lover's Lake's got to be in season 4. Anyway, that's another. We'll tackle it now. I can't remember when Lover's Lake comes up, if it's season 3 or season 4, or maybe season 2, just later on. When they're doing the whole like tunnel maps. I don't think it's season 2. I think it's season 4. Might be season 3. Anyway, Lover's Lake explicitly associates water with love, with romantic love, with romance and romantic feeling. The pool associates water with sexual attraction because whose scenes do we get at the pool? Billy and Karen. There are like a few other pool scenes that aren't focused on them, but it's specifically about like the pool set is a body of water, a body of emotion that is guarded, literally guarded by the most toxic man, maybe not the most toxic man, but one of the most toxic men in the series who is explicitly anti-everything, right? And his focus, the focus of his control and his rage goes towards relationships and goes towards masculinity as well. He talks about Steve turning bitch, like turning feminine. He tries to stop Max from dating Lucas, trying to control and what's the word? Trying to prevent any relationship that he sees as not being right, not being between like the right two parties, right? He thinks that Max should date a white boy explicitly, like that's his problem. She is not dating the right kind of man. So he already shows that he is a guard of the patriarchy. And the Paris Paloma song Good Boy comes to mind. That idea of defending something that has only ever hurt you, defending something that you think you will see the benefit from in the end, and you won't. And Billy ends up dead because he falls prey to this. But the thing about the pool that's interesting is it is explicitly sexual. Again, season 3 is the season of puberty when that starts to come up. And there is a relationship that should be a hell of a lot more taboo, but everybody's engaging in it, and it's in the light of day, right? It's in broad daylight. The pool is lit up. There is no mystery in that pool. Just like there is no mystery about all of the middle-aged women trying to hit on a man who is toxic, but is also a child. He is 1 year at most out of high school. He is 1 year older than Nancy's daughter, and she is genuinely going to have a relationship, not a relationship, but she's going to go to the hotel or whatever to meet him. Like, that is actually wrong, but that's accepted because it's the right, the right pairing, and it's taboo, but it's happening in broad daylight. All of the other women there are also well aware that they are posing for and sexually attracted to is someone who is under 20. Like, yeah, sure, 18, 19, whatever is technically legal in whatever states. Doesn't matter to me. If there is a teen on the end of your age, that's a teenager, that's a child. And I think actually it's important that he is a teenager, because teens are supposedly like hormone crazy, whatever. Like, that's the whole idea of like being a teen. You're taken over by hormones and you get into relationships, and that's what Mike is trying to do. He's trying to emulate this this standard that he has seen set for him. But we see that the furthest maxim of that standard is Billy. Like, that's what happens. If you let yourself, not let yourself, the villain that is trying to control Billy is what Billy becomes, right? And it's all, again, this restrictive, performative masculinity that centers heavily around heterosexuality. Like, heavily. Billy is all about girls and like testosterone, and it's like a whole thing that he's this like, I'm trying to think of the word, but I can't. But like, from the moment we are introduced to him, he is sexualized, and he turns it into like a power thing. But I mean, I'm not saying that Billy was not abused and we can't have sympathy for him. But when the abused becomes the abuser, obviously that's problematic. And that is what like restrictive masculinity does. And I think that's what the Duffer Brothers are a part of what they're saying. So anyway, that's the rest of season 3. Season 4, we get California, the driest sets and the driest season. Like, I swear they picked the driest city in California they could find. When they moved to California, they could have moved to a coast. That might have made more sense. We could have seen like thunder and things over the water, over the horizon. They picked the driest ass town in California for a reason, because everybody is suppressing their emotions, right? We only see it bubble up when Elle and Mike fight. And I think it's important also that Elle cries during that fight. Will cries during the painting confession. Mike does not shed a tear the whole season. Mike does not go near any water. Like, they are, I mean, I guess the pizza dough freezer, but they are so intentionally, there is such an intentional lack of water in this season, because Mike is staying as far as he can away from those emotions that are threatening to drown him. And that's the thing, right? We always talk about like emotions drowning you, emotions, like a wave of emotion overcoming you. Like, this is a thing, right? This is a common metaphor. And we'll get to the most common of the metaphors in season 5. But season 4, there's like no water. Rinkomania has this weird underwater atmosphere with all the blue lighting, but it's explicitly artificial. Even, like, I know that obviously throwing water on someone wouldn't really be a prank, but the fact that they're drinking milkshakes, like, everything is fake. Everything is, there's no, like, ooh, I just thought of an interesting parallel in season 3 when Lucas drinks all the water when they're going up the hill. And it's like, in that scene, he is not paying attention to Max's, like, needs. It's like he's taking what he can get from the relationship, but not then giving back any, like, support in the form of a water bottle. That's maybe a stretch. But I think it also might be a subtle little, like, hey, Lucas is being really selfish here. He is taking in and he is not, like, giving out. There's also the whole season 4 when they dive into Lover's Lake, and it's like, that is when we see Nancy really, like, become conflicted about Steve. We also see, I think it's interesting that Robin is there because it's love, and she doesn't love Steve that way, but Robin and Steve absolutely love each other platonically. And I think one of the things the show does really, really well is not devalue platonic love. Like, I think some people argue that Will and Mike shouldn't get together because, you know, boys should be able to have tender, loving, emotional friendships. And they should, and they do. All four of them are very emotionally close. All four of them are very caring towards each other. They're honest with each other. Like, they're really healthy friendships. They fight sometimes and they talk it out. And in season 1, Dustin even says Lucas is Mike's best friend. Like, he specifically puts them in a different, anyway, sorry, he puts them in a different category. But they have those moments, just like Mike and Elle do, even though there is not really like there's certainly not a sexual attraction there. I think maybe in season 1 there was a romantic attraction, which I will get back to the snowball as well, because I feel like that's the big almost season 2 thing, now that we've heard the line about a snowball becoming an avalanche. But that's going to come into play more in season 5 with the sort of season 5 water occurrence. So there's no water anywhere in season 4. And again, I might be mistaken, there might be some water somewhere, but it's like it's explicitly a very dry set. It is all yellow lighting when they're literally driving across the desert. There's like, they're dusty when Elle reunites with them. Like, it is meant to look so dry. And I think the absence of water is really important because it's the season where people are least in touch with their emotions and where they're least honest about their emotions with each other. The one thing we do see in season 4 with water is the pizza freezer, with Jonathan and Jonathan and Will, like, salting it up for Elle to use. And I think it's so interesting that Will is the one to prepare the small emotional bath that Elle will then use. Like, Will seeds that emotion, right? Will, even the fact that she uses salt water, like, yes, it's a sensory deprivation tank, but it's also the only water that we see in season 2 or in season 4 is salt water. It is water that is not hydrating, is not nourishing. It is water that is, oh, what's the word that means like drying? It's water that's drying, right? Tears are salt water. You cannot drink salt water. It will dehydrate you. It is not life-giving water. It is water that instead saps life. And Elle is heartbroken and Will is heartbroken. Like, that makes sense. And then in the tub, it's also not life-giving water. And I know that she's used like bathtubs throughout kind of the whole thing. But I do think it's interesting that she doesn't use like a sensory deprivation tank in the lab. There they have her on a ladder that lowers her down. But they make a tank in the first one. Anyway, that I think has more to do with her entering like the collective unconscious, like the void. But that's, again, a topic for another day. For now, Will is the one to prepare the tub for Elle to use. Will is the one to prime the emotions that Mike will tap into to try to help Will. Like, well, help Elle. My God, I can't keep their names straight. But the fact that Will is the one to set up that speech, and then Will is the one with Jonathan to prepare this bathtub, it just feels too, like, sure, Elle's taking a break and Mike is sitting with her because he's her boyfriend or whatever. But it just, again, it feels very like Will laid all the groundwork for Mike's monologue, just like Will is laying the groundwork and putting in the work for the one body of water that we see in season 4. Now, season 5. Ooh, season 5. We've got the pipe, the breaking of the dam, the trickle becoming a flood. And I think that's the thing that I'm surprised that more people haven't been talking about. So we don't, I know obviously there's like Lover's Lake Gate, and we saw pictures of Will's actor like all drenched and behind the scenes, and there's like water safety, and maybe we will get a scene at Lover's Lake, who knows. But I think that we already got what we need from that scene. Maybe not the whole thing, but the whole idea of the pipes, the tunnels in the bathroom, it also feels like by season 4, it feels like by this point in season 5, the creators are really like smacking us over the head with as many queer innuendo as they can and trying to hammer it home that, like, yeah, you should be looking for this. Like, this is happening. But obviously the most important thing is the pipe bursting. Like, this is, to me, this is the most obvious metaphor in the whole damn show. And it was what made me go, holy shit, Mike does reciprocate his feelings. Like, oh my God. Obviously we got like a little flirt before that, but it's not like conclusive. And like many people, I was like, oh yeah, Robin gave him the speech. He's going to accept himself. He's going to end up alone. That's how the queer story goes. But I don't think that's the case, because obviously, like, Mike is one of the ones making jokes about hitting the dick, and I hope it's not too hard. And Mike is the one to puncture the pipe. Mike punctures the pipe. Mike recognizes, like, we've all heard, and I don't know where it comes from, so I can't credit, like, the Bible or whatever gave it to us, but the idea of the trickle that becomes a flood. That's just a common concept. We've also had Robin just talk about the snowball that becomes an avalanche. So I would agree or argue that the snowball was important, that that was maybe the first drop for Mike, the first trickle, the first crack in the dam that will eventually lead to it bursting. Like, this is, again, such a common metaphor. And we have Mike punctures the pipe. We try to ignore it. He sees the drops. He doesn't really do anything. Or maybe he immediately goes up. I don't think so. Maybe he does. But we get a couple of drops. Mike is the one who notices that the pipes have started to burst, which I don't really understand how that happens. Like, the whole actual plumbing of it in that scene kind of confuses me. But he punctures the pipe. I guess that changes the pressure somehow. And he is the one to notice, like, oh shit, it's flooding. Again, Mike tries to stop it. Mike notices that the water is escaping from its confines and he tries to stop it. But it becomes a flood. He is unable to contain it. Will is unable to contain it with him. The two of them are trying desperately to contain this water, this emotional outpouring, to keep it in the pipes, to keep it safely tucked away where nobody sees it or has to deal with it, and they can't. And they both end up soaked by it. Nobody else ends up soaked. Derek is in there with them, like, trying to block the door. Derek, I would assume, also falls over when the army bursts in. Derek is not covered in water. Mike and Will are absolutely drenched. And that is the thing. I think this, not scene, but this, I don't really know what to call it, event, I guess. The event of their breaking in here and then the fight that ensues in season 5, episode 4, that is the breaking of the dam for Mike. And again, people have sort of, this seems to be, we all saw the look on Mike's face. We all recognize that. But it's the combination of, like, the fact that in the previous episode, we had the idea of the snowball becoming an avalanche. That's not a common metaphor. That's a weird metaphor. But what is snow if not water? Like, it perfectly parallels the leak that becomes a flood, the trickle that becomes a flood. And I think we see in that bathroom scene, Mike desperate to contain this water, and especially desperate to contain the water out of fear of being discovered by the army, the most aggressively, violently masculine institution on the planet, really. I mean, maybe it borders with the church, but, like, let's be honest, they kind of go hand in hand on a lot of instances. But he is trying to avoid detection by the army men, who also keep, I mean, there's all of the closet imagery and all of the Mike open the door kind of scenes and quotes. these big macho men are trying to get him to open the door, trying to discover them, and he is desperate to stop this flood of water from getting them caught. And he can't. It bursts, it drenches them, it does flood the floor, and I think that's the main thing. They are drenched and the floor floods. It's not like, I don't know, it leaks onto an important electrical doodad and then that screws up their plan. It's, they can't contain the leak, they are completely soaked, the bathroom is flooded, and they are discovered. That is so heavily queer-coded and so symbolic of not being able to contain your emotions anymore, that then 5 minutes later, when Mike is playing the protector and Will comes in to save the day, like, he's still drenched when he looks at Will. He is still covered in the water that symbolizes emotion and emotional, like romantic emotion, especially that symbolizes the emotion that is not meant to be seen, right? It is water that is in pipes. It's not like, again, a bathtub tipped over. Like, it is explicitly water that should have stayed in the pipes. And that is what, and I'm not saying should have stayed as in actually should have stayed, but that in this environment was supposed to stay hidden, was supposed to stay away from the eye. And he is still drenched in that when he looks at Will with like the most loving, awestruck look you've ever seen on Mike's face. Like, it's just, I don't know, to me that is confirmation. And of course, I'm not the Duffers. I can't say 100% that Mike and Will get together. But in terms of coming at it from like a film study, like text analysis perspective, and looking at the symbolism of water, I don't see how it doesn't happen at this point. He can't contain it anymore. It has not been contained. It has officially been let out, and Mike has at this point acknowledged, in my mind, he has acknowledged what he feels. The water has come to the surface, the emotion has come to the surface, he cannot contain it anymore, and he has to acknowledge it. And I think that is what happened in that final shot. I guess it's not the final shot is Will, but the second final shot, the penultimate shot of the episode. I think it could have just been like, wow, look at my friend gaining his power. But I don't think that's the case. And I think part of that has to do with, last little bit here, Mike the Brave. I think they brought up Mike the Brave and Holly the Heroic for a reason, because Robin is talking about being scared, being so damn scared, needing to find the courage to be herself. Like, it is all about the bravery that it takes to be yourself. And we've seen that throughout the whole series. Like, the series is all about the courage to be different, the courage to be not what people want you to be. And I think Mike the Brave is going to have to really live up to his name. And now that he's aware of this, now that it's come to the surface, because there, as someone who also repressed queerness for a long time, there is a long time when you genuinely are oblivious. And you think that it would be fine if you were queer, but really you don't feel that way. And then when it hits you that you are, it's like, cool, now I have to deal with this and wrestle with this. And now I get to work through all the internalized shit. And I think that's what Mike is maybe doing. Maybe he had started doing it. Maybe he got an inkling and he kind of started that work already. But I don't know. I think this was the breaking of the dam for Mike Wheeler. And now Mike the Brave is going to have to step up and actually step up and come out, if you will. I don't think he necessarily has to come out. I also don't think I think there's a big argument that like you can't just make Mike gay. It's like, do we need to make him gay? Do we need to like work through a whole sexual identity here? Can we not just say that two childhood best friends fell in love? Like, forgive me for the bad pun, but stranger things have happened. And I don't know. I think it's been there all along. And I think that episode 4 really, really hammered it home. And I'm deeply excited to see what comes next because, I just can't wait. This ended up being a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I was thinking it was going to be like 20 minutes. But seems I had a lot to say on water, and maybe I know it wasn't particularly concise. Yeah, I've never really done this before, but I had a lot of thoughts, and I tried writing them out, and it wasn't working. There was too much to write. So if you're still here, I hope you enjoyed. I would love to hear what you think, like genuinely. If you disagree, if you agree, yeah, I would love to hear any other perspectives on this. I'm sure that maybe someone else has like I don't think I've like cracked this open. I'm sure that somebody somewhere else has thought about this and maybe written about this, maybe spoken about this. I didn't find it, and I would go crazy all on my own if I tried to read and watch every piece of like byler analysis before saying anything, which was kind of what I was like, oh, better make sure I've done all the research first. And then I realized that was insane. So if somebody else has also thought about this and has thoughts, feel free to, make any recommendations. But yeah, I'm going to keep going through the series now and see what else comes up. See if anything else comes up. See if anything totally disproves what I'm saying. Obviously I'm open to that too. This is just a theory. Not a theory, I guess. This is a thesis, a hypothesis, if you will. But yeah, I just thought this was too kind of cool and interesting not to talk about, but I am a sucker for water symbolism. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and maybe I'll see you again next time.